The conversation about the history of Benarrawa starts in the early 90s, around 92, 93. And it follows maybe 8 or 10 years of intentional practice in this area, particularly around the graceful Christ the King Catholic parish, where families had approached the school, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families in the southern part of the city had approached the school about being included and an intentional program happening. A lot of passion and commitment in the local community had generated in result to that. But people were aware that we had the benefit of, say, a couple of parish priests in a row who were very committed to that. But you couldn't assume that was always going to continue. And there was a degree of ownership beyond the Catholic parish in the locality about that. So people started to think, well, what could we do, what should we do to sustain that engagement? And where it went to was, well, we could try and capture some of that work and some of that practice within a community organisation and call it Benarrawa. That organisation was not an organisation for and about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but was inclusive of that. And it did a range of things. So it had a small amount of resources and it established itself as an incorporated association. So it was independent and even more inclusive than going beyond the parish. There were some interesting steps in that process, notably the name. At the time, because there was a government funding involved, there was some encouragement from state government that you had a sensible name like Inner Southworth Suburbs Community Development Association. And that was all the rage at the time, was to use geography in the name of your organisation. So there was some fairly intense conversations because we'd stumbled across and discovered that the watercourse of the Oxley Creek was Benarrawa. And that locality and the land around it was, the naming of it was still available in terms of Indigenous people. So we went about a process of consulting the custodian of language at the time, who was Uncle Neville Bonner, a notable Australian, Indigenous Australian, Australia's first senator, Indigenous senator. We got his permission, and then we got the permission of the Brisbane Council of Elders. So we proceeded to adopt that name.
I probably got to know about, well, prior to it becoming Benarrawa, because my children went to Christ the King school and they had a high Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander student population there. I was involved with some of the activities happening there and on the ASPA committee, which was the Aboriginal education funding grant at the time. It was probably 7 or 8 years ago when I was approached to do some workshops in the schools and began working in reconciliation activities with Benarrawa. At the time I started working with the Benarrawa and the activities, I was only in my 30s, early 30s. So all the elders, the older generation, my mother's generation, were all the elders. So those elders then, they were strong elders in that they'd come through the government administration, the mission system, the segregation. They'd come through that.
I like getting involved in things because when you do get involved, everyone's got a little bit more to give. And sometimes there's things that you want to put into place and you don't think of a certain thing and someone else comes up with that idea and you think, oh, that's a great idea. Us having the group, they've helped me, but I've helped them.
My cousin, Sister Kerry, who's been involved with Benarrawa for quite a while, and she introduced me to the Sorry Day event that Benarrawa was facilitating. Other things I became aware of that Benarrawa does in support of Indigenous people, Aboriginal people and traditional owner people, Torres Strait Islander people. There's a solidarity group that, supports different aspects of Indigenous social life, political life, and even to some extent some economic development with Aboriginal groups.
Benarrawa is not just the workers, and so the Benarrawa Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Solidarity Group is owned by the people that are a part of it. And it has some fabulous and phenomenal people as parts of that solidarity group. It's also had people who may never have thought that they would end up in a space like that. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Solidarity was not their thing, but through relationship with an Indigenous person and through participation in this space, it became a thing that was of importance to them. And I think that relationship has been incredibly important in carrying that through.
At Benarrawa and in the Solidarity Group, part of our main purpose at that time was to educate ourselves and the wider community, to build relationships with Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people and to continue to learn.
On Sorry Day, it used to be a small little group. I was even happy with that because the people that turned up, I thought, that's wonderful. Thank you for coming and thank you for supporting. Now it's so many schools and so many people and it's just got bigger and bigger. I don't even know what this year's going to bring because every year is doing now, it's just huge. And that just shows how many people are walking beside you.
I think the stuff that really, really excited me, particularly around things like the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Art Show and Cultural Festival, which was a partnership with Milperra State High School. So for people who don't know, Milperra State High School is a high school that supports young people arriving in Australia really through their first months.
Well, Benarrawa, a good friend of mine, Sarah Boyne, invited me down and said, "Oh, they're looking to do an Indigenous art show and culture festival." I sort of come along on the very first one and sort of put a bit of work in and got invited to Benarrawa to work on the steering committee to assist with the artists, introduce Indigenous artists to the festival, but also have that Indigenous input towards what was going on. It started off slow. We ended up with probably about 5 or 10 artists in the first couple of shows, but there was a lot of art. So some artists would show up with 5, 10, 15, 20 paintings. But once word got around, we were looking at something like 70 different artists who was putting their artwork in, So we went from virtually 2 classrooms to 5 classrooms in, something like 200 paintings hanging on the walls.
We started having Invasion Day ceremonies in the mid-2000s.
We talked about doing something on Invasion Day, coming together as some sort of reflection, a group of people, and almost lest we forget moment. And when we first talked about it, it was sort of like just a small group of people in the Solidarity group. And we were sort of like, oh, well, it's an event. Should we advertise it? Do we need to put it into the local newspaper? Should we get flyers out? And the response was, let's just do it.
I suppose that number of people grew and in volume, so we eventually moved to the mouth of Oxley Creek. Council had commissioned someone to build a bronze canoe, which was eventually put at the mouth of Oxley Creek. After that canoe went into place, probably in the early 2010s, we would certainly gather there, put flowers in the canoe, on Survival. We changed the name from Invasion Day to Survival Day because that's what the elders wanted us to remember, that they had survived.
That painting there, which is the story of Benarrawa, and the story of Benarrawa, and that was a painting done by Ravina Waldron's cousin, John Tatton, and it tells the story of Benarrawa, and so that's a blueprint of principles and values and practice for Benarrawa as well. So that continually gets reflected back into the group.
Benarrawa would be what I would call, for me, the mother. And she's got the arms extending. And you've got all these people that work in there that are walking with us. And that's a mighty feeling. It's a very proud feeling for me. I'm just so grateful that I got them walking beside me. But not only that, they're my friends.
When